question 6 gives you some information about the Amazonian forest, and it tells you that the Amazonian forest today contains a very high diversity of bird species. And that gives you a little bit of information about the natural history of the Amazonian forest, and it says that over the last 2 million years we had periods of dry climate that caused this forest to separate into smaller forests. It tells that different plant communities developed in each of these smaller forests, and each time the climate became wetter again, those forests have grown in size. It then says, use the information provided to explain how a very high diversity of bird species has developed in the Amazonian forest. Looking at this question, I can see that I've been given quite a bit of information, and if I take out my highlighter tool, I can see that I've been given information about separation of the forest into smaller regions, and that I've got information about different communities evolving, and then the smaller forests being formed back into a bigger forest. And I'm trying to explain how a very high diversity has developed. So, I've got some information about what appears to be the geographical isolation of individuals. I've been told there's a high diversity of species, and I've been told that it's developed over time. So in other words, new species have developed and been produced. All that information together tells me that this question is about speciation, and what I'm really trying to explain here is how speciation takes place. Now, it's not going to be quite enough just to explain how speciation takes place in general. The question is asking me to use the information, so I've got to make sure that I'm actually using information about forests and birds to answer the question. So here are my 5 marks. I need to mention that the separation of forests has led to geographical isolation. I need to explain that that's led to different regions of forests with different conditions and selection pressures, and that due to the pre-existing variations in the bird population due to mutation, that will have led to organisms with different adaptations passing on their alleles, and as a result, different individuals and different adaptations will be favoured in different regions of forests. At the end of this, we'd have got changes in allele frequency leading to new species being formed. Now you can see the keywords that I've used in this question. I've used, or in my answer at least, we've got geographical isolation, mutation, selection pressures, we've got the mention of alleles and allele frequency, and those are all things that you should be trying to get into a question to do with speciation. Finally, we've got a suggest question. Now, suggest questions aren't asking you to use information from your own knowledge, but they're asking you to use a bit of common sense and the information that you've been told to come up with a sensible guess. It tells us that speciation is far less frequent in the reformed Amazonian forest, so in other words, the forest that's not been split into little groups, and it wants a reason for this. So we've been told that the separation of the larger Amazonian forest into smaller separate forests has led to speciation, and we've explained in our previous answer that this is due to geographical isolation. So one reason why we'll have less speciation in the reformed Amazonian forest is because that geographical isolation isn't present. Now, you've got to go a little bit further than that with this answer and explain why that affects speciation. The reason we don't get speciation without geographical isolation is that without geographical isolation, organisms are all able to share genes, and that sharing of genes in a common gene pool results in organisms being kept within the same species. There's not space for organisms to diverge into separate species. This is one answer you could give. You could also have tried to explain that in the reformed Amazonian forest there was no difference in terms of the environmental conditions leading to different adaptations being favoured in different regions. But I prefer this explanation because I think this is more biologically correct.